Hello, glad to see you on the channel. Subscribe, give a like, and don't forget to leave a comment. Enjoy watching.
Stop being a hero, he said, not even looking up from his clipboard, like what I'd just brought to him was a note about a missing mop bucket and not, a pretty serious safety issue that could literally kill someone in a live fire. I just stood there for a second, staring at him, waiting for maybe a smirk, a grin, something that said he was joking. But no, Lieutenant Mike Greeley, new guy, 6 months in, square jaw, clipboard always in hand, fresh white helmet with barely a scratch on it. Just scribbled something on his form and walked right past me like I was invisible. So that's how it started. That was the moment I knew I was done. 15 years in that house. Station 47. I knew the sound of the back bay door opening better than I knew my own ringtone. I trained half the guys in that place. Ran into more burning buildings than I care to count. And now some shiny new lieutenant who had a faster rise through the ranks than a 4th of July bottle rocket was brushing me off like a piece of lint. All because I raised a red flag about the new SCBA tanks, the breathing gear, the lifeline, basically. The issue was simple. These new tanks had faulty valves. A slow leak, barely noticeable, but enough to matter. I'd noticed it during drills, logged it, even brought it up in the last 2 maintenance meetings. I got shoulder shrugs, maybe we'll look into it, and that's it. So this time, I pushed a little harder. Big mistake. That's when I got the hero line. Like pointing out a safety flaw means I'm trying to win a damn medal. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was trying to make sure someone's kid didn't lose their dad over a 50-cent part. So I nodded. Just once. Packed my locker. Didn't say anything dramatic. Didn't make a scene. Just unhooked my jacket, folded it the way I always do, grabbed the duffel I've had since I was 26, and left. The quiet ones are the ones you gotta worry about, right? That's what they say in those true crime documentaries. I wasn't planning revenge. Not yet, anyway. I was just tired. Tired of yelling into a void. Tired of being treated like a problem just because I was older and gave a damn. And here's the kicker, the real punchline to all of this. That night, same day I walked out, there's a call. Kitchen fire at a duplex in Midtown. Nothing too wild. Nothing 5 guys couldn't handle. Standard issue. But one of the rookies, Eli, gets caught up inside longer than expected. Backup air runs low. He panics. Ends up with burns and smoke inhalation. Minor, thank God. Could have been worse. You know what tank he was wearing? One of the ones I flagged. You know what they blamed it on? Operational stress and unfamiliarity with procedures. Sure, I heard about it from a buddy still in the house. He called me while I was halfway through my second beer, sitting on the porch. Said, "Hey, you're not gonna believe this." And the second he said it was Eli, I knew. I didn't need to hear the rest. I already knew. But that's not what really pissed me off. What pissed me off was the call I got the next morning. Not from the department, not from the chief, not even from Greeley. Some guy from the city's PR office asked if I had shared any proprietary information with external parties. Proprietary? Like the truth is a company's secret now? I asked if this was about the tanks, and he gave me this long pause, too long, and said he couldn't comment on active matters. I told him to lose my number. So now I'm the guy who quit mid-shift, supposedly because I couldn't adjust to change. Word gets around fast when it's convenient for them. They painted me like some bitter old burnout who didn't like taking orders from a younger guy. Which, yeah, I didn't. Not because he was young, but because he was careless. There's a difference. And if I'm being honest, that's what stung the most. Not being ignored. I've been ignored before. But being misrepresented? That gets under your skin. Because I gave a damn. About that house. About those guys. About the people we helped. I missed holidays, birthdays, even my own damn anniversary once, to be there when that alarm rang. I didn't ask for a parade. I just wanted someone to check the damn valves. You know what no one tells you? That leaving something you love doesn't always feel like taking a stand. Sometimes, it feels like giving up. Like letting them win. And I sat with that feeling for a long time that night. Didn't sleep much. Kept playing it over and over in my head. What if I'd stayed quiet? What if I just let it go? Maybe Eli wouldn't have gotten hurt. Maybe he would have. Who knows? But then I remembered the way Greeley looked right through me. Like I was a ghost. And that's when I knew staying would have meant becoming exactly that. A ghost with a badge. Invisible. Until something finally went wrong and I couldn't live with myself anymore. So yeah, I walked. Packed my locker. Drove home in silence. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. What would you do if your boss ignored you and someone got hurt? Would you walk away or stay and hope the damage doesn't come back on you? It's funny how quickly the calls stop coming once you're no longer on the inside, especially after you've been painted as the problem instead of the guy who was trying to keep everyone alive and breathing. The same people who used to call me first to cover a shift or ask for advice on a new drill plan were suddenly all busy, unavailable, or just conveniently silent. You could almost hear the air shift when my name came up, like someone had opened a window in a meeting room and nobody wanted to be the one to close it. I didn't expect a parade when I walked out. I didn't need anyone to tell me I was right, though I sure as hell wouldn't have minded it. But what I didn't expect was to be erased so completely. It took exactly 4 days for the department to make it like I'd never existed there at all. They scrubbed my name off the training board, reassigned my locker, and reassured the crew that everything was under control now, as if I'd been some kind of loose cannon they were finally free from. I heard about the rookie's injury from Mike, one of the old dogs who still owed me a few favors. He wasn't supposed to call me, said he had to step outside during dinner just to talk. I asked him flat out if it was the tank, and there was this long pause, then just a quiet, yeah. He told me the report was already being written up to make it sound like Eli panicked, froze up, wasn't ready for the stress. Never mind the fact that the same issue I raised, the slow leak, was what caused his tank to drop pressure faster than it should have. Never mind that I'd brought it up repeatedly. They were pinning it on Eli, who was barely 6 months out of the academy and still trying to make a name for himself. I tried texting Eli, just to check on him, let him know I had his back. No reply. I wasn't surprised. I've been in that spot before, where you're too afraid to talk to the wrong person because you don't know who's listening. Greeley had already started circling the wagons, making himself out to be the calm, collected leader who handled the incident with professionalism and unshakable command presence. I nearly choked on my coffee watching him on the local news, giving an interview at a community safety event like he hadn't just nearly gotten a kid killed. He even thanked the department's exceptional training standards for preventing a worse outcome. That right there? That's when the switch flipped in my head. Because it wasn't just about pride anymore. It wasn't about my hurt feelings or bruised ego. It was about the fact that someone almost died, and they were lying about it, covering it up, spinning it like a win, and gaslighting everyone who knew better. That was the part that really got to me, not the betrayal. I've been through that before. But the rewriting of the story. That's the kind of thing that sticks in your throat long after the initial blow has landed. I tried reaching out to the union rep, Dave Bonner, an old pal who used to play poker with me on Friday nights when we were both still doing overnight shifts. He gave me the classic line, "It's tricky now that you're no longer active." Said he wished he could help, but that I'd technically left voluntarily, so his hands were tied. It's amazing how people's hands always end up tied when you need them to do the right thing. You start to realize how much of the system is designed not to protect the workers, but to protect itself. Nobody wants to rock the boat, especially when the people in charge are smiling and shaking hands at fundraisers. At first, I told myself I'd let it go. Maybe take a few weeks off, clear my head, maybe even look for another department. But something about the silence, about how quickly they moved on, just gnawed at me. I'd spent years sweating inside turnout gear, running drills in the rain, missing every Thanksgiving since 2009, and in less than a week, I was a ghost. Like I'd never existed, never mattered, never stepped between a mother and a house fire or carried a scared kid out of a second-floor window. Like I was just some bitter old guy who couldn't keep up. I sat at the kitchen table that night and opened up my old work laptop, not the department-issued one, but my own, where I'd backed up maintenance logs, drill schedules, and some personal notes. I didn't know what I was looking for at first. Maybe I just wanted proof that I hadn't imagined it all. But the more I looked, the more I found. Notes I'd taken during equipment checks, pictures I'd snapped of the tank valves during inspection, emails I'd sent up the chain that got ignored. Every little thing I'd flagged was sitting right there, time-stamped and dust-covered like they were waiting for someone to finally pay attention. That's when the idea started to take shape, not revenge exactly, but something quieter, sharper. If they wanted to pretend like I never existed, fine. But I wasn't going to let them rewrite the story without a fight. Not when a kid got hurt. Not when someone else could get killed next time. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Because the moment they decided to treat the truth like a liability, they turned the wrong guy into a ghost. And ghosts? We don't forget. Be honest, have you ever watched someone take credit for something you bled for, while you were left behind like you never mattered? What would you have done in my boots? The thing about working somewhere for 15 years, especially a place like a firehouse where everything from the floor cleaner to the hose nozzles has to be signed for, checked off, inspected, and logged, is that the paper trail never really disappears. It just gets buried under new layers of dust and deniability. I wasn't trying to play detective when I started digging through my old files, not at first anyway, but once you find the first thread sticking out of a rotten sweater, it's almost impossible not to tug on it and see how far the unraveling goes. I had more saved on that laptop than I realized, copies of inspection forms I'd scanned in because the department's system crashed so often you couldn't trust it, notes from safety meetings I typed up late at night when the guys were sleeping and the station was quiet, and dozens of photos, blurry or not, that showed gear we'd been using long past its expiration date. I'd been documenting things for years out of habit, maybe because part of me had always known that if anything ever went sideways, no one would be there to say, yeah, he was right all along. And guess what? When I started lining everything up, it was like staring at a slow-moving train wreck that had been happening right under our noses for months. The new SCBA tanks, the ones I flagged, had been rushed into circulation through a waiver signed off by someone named Darren Linz, a name I didn't recognize at first. So I did some digging, because curiosity is a hard thing to turn off when your name's already been dragged through the mud and you've got nothing left to lose. Turns out Darren Linz used to run a small equipment supply company that had been trying to get a contract with the city for years, but never quite made the cut until 6 months ago, right around the time Greeley showed up, bright-eyed and clipboard happy. Digging into it further, I found out Linz had been appointed to the department's procurement oversight board 2 months before the tank switch. And wouldn't you know it, right after that appointment, the usual vendor was temporarily paused for review, and these new tanks got the green light without a single documented field test. Not one. Just a clean approval stamp and a chain of emails full of vague buzzwords like streamlining, budget efficiency, and strategic modernization. I wasn't surprised, not really. I've seen how fast good intentions get eaten alive once money enters the room. But what hit me hard was seeing my own name at the bottom of one of the approval logs, an internal document that supposedly confirmed I had signed off on the switch during a safety trial meeting I never attended. My jaw actually dropped when I saw it, because that wasn't just a lie, that was a forged signature on a document that could have ended up in court if someone had died. And the worst part? It was sloppy. They didn't even bother to match my writing style, just typed my name and added a half-assed digital scribble that looked like it came from a child using a trackpad. That's when something inside me snapped, not in a rage kind of way, not like I was ready to drive down to the station and throw punches, but in that quiet, steady kind of way where you realize you've got the truth on your side, and maybe for the first time in your life. The evidence is finally heavier than the lies. I started organizing everything, creating folders, printing out backups, highlighting every date, every inconsistency, every misstep. I had emails I'd sent up the chain that went unanswered, photos with metadata timestamps showing the damaged equipment, and maintenance logs with my initials beside repair requests that had never been fulfilled. I even went back and found the memo about the safety meeting they claimed I'd attended, and just for kicks, I pulled up my location history from my phone, proving I'd been 2 counties away that day, visiting my father at the VA hospital. They didn't just ignore me, they built a lie and stapled my name to it. And here's where it all came into focus for me. This wasn't just some rookie mistake or a miscommunication. This was a deliberate effort to cover up a dangerous decision, pushed through by people who either didn't care who got hurt or were too focused on their own upward mobility to bother with consequences. Greeley wasn't just a bad leader. He was the kind of guy who played chess with other people's lives, then shrugged when the board caught fire. I remember sitting in my garage that night, the sound of the neighbor's dog barking in the distance, piles of paper around me, and thinking to myself, if I don't do something with this, I'm no better than they are. If I stay quiet now, after everything I've seen, then Eli's injury becomes just another footnote in a long list of close calls swept under a rug no one dares to lift. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I reached out to someone in the press. Her name was Mel Alvarez, a local reporter I'd met once during a CPR demo for Community Day, the kind of journalist who didn't mind getting her hands dirty or standing outside a courthouse for 3 hours just to get a 5-second soundbite. I sent her a message, told her I had information that could change the narrative on a recent fire incident, and asked if she wanted to hear more. She replied within 5 minutes, "Let's talk." I didn't sleep much that night, but for the first time in weeks, it wasn't because of anger or regret. It was because I knew that the tide was turning, and for once, the truth might actually have a fighting chance. Because sometimes the most dangerous guy in the room isn't the loud one with the badge, it's the quiet one with the receipts. Have you ever caught someone rewriting history with your name attached? What would you do if the only thing standing between lies and justice was you? The morning I dropped the files wasn't dramatic or cinematic or even that satisfying in the moment. It was quiet, methodical, almost surgical, like the way a firefighter moves through thick smoke, one step at a time, with your head low and your instincts dialed up to 10. I had spent nearly 2 weeks organizing everything into folders, both digital and hard copy, cross-referencing every document with dates, pulling screenshots of my emails, highlighting names, and double-checking timestamps to make sure it was bulletproof. There was no room for error, not when you're accusing a city department of forgery, negligence, and willful endangerment. Mel Alvarez, the reporter I reached out to, didn't waste any time after I first contacted her. We met in person at a diner just off Route 7, neutral territory, quiet, no cameras. She came in with a recorder in one hand and a notebook in the other, but she didn't lead with questions or posture like most reporters I'd seen in the past. She just looked me in the eye and said, "Talk to me like I don't know a thing." And that was all I needed. I laid it out piece by piece, how the tanks were faulty, how the procurement process was rigged, how my signature was forged, and how they blamed a rookie for what was, essentially, their own corner-cutting gone wrong. Mel listened without interrupting, jotting down notes and asking smart, pointed questions only when she needed clarity. When I showed her the photos of the tanks and the metadata timestamps, her eyebrows went up. When I showed her the forged signature and the GPS proof I was nowhere near that meeting, she let out a low whistle. She didn't say much at the end, just promised she'd dig deeper on her side and keep me updated. "You're not crazy," she said as we parted ways in the parking lot. "They just thought you'd stay quiet." It took her 6 days to turn everything I gave her into a full-fledged investigative piece, and when it hit the local news site, buried at first under a puff piece about a dog park renovation, I wasn't even sure anyone would read it. But by the end of the day, the headline was trending on local social media pages, shared by concerned citizens and off-duty firefighters, and even a few elected officials who suddenly remembered my name. "Internal safety lapses and fire department spark outrage after rookie injury" was the sanitized title, but the body of the article pulled no punches. Mel had done her homework. She FOIA'd additional emails, confirmed the connection between Darren Lenz and the procurement board, and even managed to get a quote from Eli, who finally broke his silence and told the truth. "I thought I screwed up," he told her in the article. "They made it sound like I panicked. But I remember the gauge dropping way too fast. I wasn't ready to die in that kitchen." That single quote hit me harder than I expected. I'd been so wrapped up in proving my point and getting the truth out that I'd almost forgotten what it was really about: keeping the people on the front lines alive, giving them a fighting chance when things go sideways. That's all I'd ever tried to do. And now, finally, someone was listening. The department went into lockdown mode almost immediately. Official statements were released within hours of the article gaining traction, filled with the usual nonsense about taking these allegations seriously and launching a comprehensive internal review. Greeley was nowhere to be seen. I checked the press briefings and noticed he hadn't appeared in uniform since the story broke. A quiet leave of absence followed 2 days later, which the mayor's office claimed was unrelated to the article, but anyone who's been around long enough knows that kind of coincidence doesn't exist. Then came the calls, the ones I never thought I'd get again. Former colleagues, guys I hadn't heard from in months, suddenly remembered how to find my number. Some called to apologize, others just wanted to say they saw the story and that I was right. A few were still cautious, worried about their jobs or reputations, but you could hear it in their voices, the crack in the facade, the itch to stop pretending everything was fine. One guy, Randy Powell, who used to be my bunkmate during overnight shifts, told me something that stuck. "Man, I didn't say anything before because I didn't want to get iced out like you. But when I saw Eli's name in that article, I realized I'd been lying to myself." That's when it really hit me. This wasn't just about one call, one tank, one rookie. It was about a whole system of silence, where speaking up made you the enemy and keeping your head down was the only way to survive. I'd spent years in that system, trying to fix it from the inside, until I finally got pushed out for caring too much. But now the system had a crack and water was seeping through. By the end of the week, Internal Affairs had opened a case file. The city council announced a review board. Darren Lenz resigned from his position on the procurement committee for personal reasons, which translated into before they kick me out and drag my name across the evening news. I even got a call from the rookie's father, who thanked me for not letting them bury it. I told him I hadn't done it alone. It was the truth and a good reporter doing most of the work. I just gave it a place to start. The funny thing is, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't crack a beer and sit back like I just scored the winning touchdown. What I felt was this strange, hollow calm, like I'd been holding my breath for weeks and was finally allowed to exhale. Because it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But at least the world was finally seeing the rod I'd been yelling about in the dark. Because sometimes you can't fight the fire from inside the house. Sometimes you have to step outside, throw a match of your own, and let the smoke tell the story. If you had the proof in your hands, the kind that could ruin people, but also save lives, would you burn it or blow the whistle? I didn't expect a parade, not even a thank you note, and definitely not an apology. Though for a hot second I imagined someone from the city council shaking my hand in front of a podium while reporters clicked away and muttered something about courage or integrity or whatever word they dust off when they realize they can't spin their way out of a cover-up. What I got instead was silence, a vacuum where noise used to be, no calls from the department, no emails from the chief, no angry denials or desperate outreach from Greeley or his lawyer. Just a statement from the department's press office saying Lieutenant Michael Greeley would be taking an indefinite leave of absence to attend to personal matters, and that a full review of equipment procurement procedures was already underway. Now, if you've been around long enough, you know exactly what that means. They don't fire their own, not in public, not when the badge is still shiny and the paperwork still warm. They bury the problem under procedural language and let the offending party slink away into a quiet, well-funded retirement, maybe with a few months of paid leave to soften the blow. And that's exactly what they did. But this time, something was different, not because they changed, but because someone had finally pulled back the curtain, and even the people who wanted to look away couldn't unsee what was behind it. The leak didn't just rattle a few cages, it set off a chain reaction. Other stories started popping up, anonymous tips from inside other departments, reports of outdated gear and missing maintenance records, whispers of hush-hush deals that sounded an awful lot like the Linz Greeley arrangement. It was like everyone had been holding their breath for years and suddenly realized they weren't the only ones suffocating. That's when I knew I wasn't alone anymore. I'd just been the first guy dumb or stubborn enough to strike the match. Still, I didn't go back. A couple of guys from Station 47 reached out quietly, off the record, on personal phones instead of work lines, to say things were changing. They said the chief was pissed, not just because of the leak, but because he knew he'd been played too. Greeley had sold himself as a forward thinker, a reformer with clean boots and a modern strategy, and in the end, he'd almost cost someone their life while pushing garbage gear through a backdoor handshake. The chief had defended that guy, stood beside him at council meetings, probably wrote glowing reports with his name at the top, and now he was stuck explaining to the mayor why a city-funded investigation was turning over rocks no one ever wanted moved. But even with the tides turning and the right people squirming, I stayed out of the house. There was a part of me that missed it. Sure, the crackle of the radio before a call, the sound of boots hitting concrete during shift change, even the weird midnight camaraderie that only exists between people who've crawled through flames together. I missed the weight of the gear on my back and the way the guys always gave each other hell just before heading into something that could kill us. I missed the job, but I couldn't go back. Not because of pride, and not because I wasn't wanted. I think, eventually, they might have welcomed me again. But because I knew if I walked through those doors, I'd be walking into the same structure that let this all happen in the first place. And I wasn't the same man who left. So instead, I helped from the outside. Quietly. When a young captain from a nearby district reached out and asked if I'd help him review their gear contracts, I said yes. When a journalist wanted context for another story involving equipment failures in the Northeast sector, I gave it to her. When Eli texted me one night and said he was thinking about quitting because he didn't trust anyone anymore, I met him for coffee and talked him down. Told him not everyone in this job's a liar. Some of us still remember what it means to run toward the fire instead of hiding behind policy. He didn't say much, just nodded a lot and stared at his coffee. But when he showed up to his next shift, I knew I'd done something right. That's the thing they never prepare you for, not just the physical wear and tear, the missed holidays, or the gut-deep exhaustion, but the emotional toll of giving your life to something that forgets you the second you become inconvenient. They don't tell you how fast loyalty gets exchanged for optics, how quickly your reputation becomes a threat when you stop nodding and start asking questions. They just teach you to hold the hose, follow protocol, and trust the guy above you. But what do you do when the guy above you's the one lighting the match? I wasn't a hero. I never wanted to be one. I just wanted to make sure the guys coming up behind me didn't have to choose between doing the right thing and keeping their job. And maybe, just maybe, I did a little of that. Maybe some greenhorn reads that article and decides to speak up next time something doesn't feel right. Maybe some chief in another city sees what happened here and double-checks his contracts. Maybe one life gets saved because I didn't keep my mouth shut. That's enough for me. Doesn't need to be a movie. Doesn't need to end with justice served on a silver platter. Because this isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about accountability, about knowing when to stay and when to walk away, and about what it means to fight for a truth that won't win you friends but might just save a life. And yeah, maybe I lit the match, but the fire that followed? That belonged to everyone who stayed silent for too long and finally decided enough was enough. So, was it worth it? Losing the job? The pension? The reputation? Maybe. Maybe not. Depends on how you measure the value of a man's legacy. For me, it wasn't about being remembered. It was about not disappearing on my own terms. About refusing to be a ghost in someone else's lie. Because sometimes, to leave something better than you found it, you have to burn the old playbook, page by page, and make damn sure the next guy doesn't fall into the same trap. What would you have done? Stayed quiet and collected your pension, or stood up and let the truth burn its way through the lies?